Nick Meacher with Survival Dispatch Insider, and in this video we're going to talk a little bit about NVIS antenna, Near Vertical Incident Skywave. And it's a antenna theory that allows HF transmission distances out to about 3,000 miles by utilizing propagation and bouncing signals off the atmosphere or ionosphere. It's used a lot in military HF communications capabilities. You ever seen the big whip antennas on the back of military vehicles? You'll usually see they're bent over and tied to one end, and you think, well, maybe that's just to stop it flapping around. It's actually creating that angle that you need to send the signal off the side of the antenna to bounce off the atmosphere. So there's a couple of articles. And if you search the web, there are thousands of articles on different types of antenna designs that you can do. And of course, if you've ever looked at getting into HF and you look at the cost of some of these antennas and you go, that's a lot of money, you can build an NVIS antenna yourself fairly cheaply, very cheaply actually. I've built two. I've got one in another part stage of building, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So the two articles I would suggest looking at, and Nikki's going to post a link for these, but one's the Antenna Theory and Design by a guy under the call sign AAR6UK. And so that talks about the F2 layer, and if you've done your general class, you know what that is, and the angles of the signal bouncing off the atmosphere. And the other article is what they call Homebrew AS-2259 NVIS antenna, and this is modeled off of the military antenna kits. And if you go to Hamfest, sometimes you can find these kits around, but they're not cheap. People are asking a lot of money for them. They're fiberglass poles you put together. Your antenna high point is about 15 feet off the ground, and then it's got base and guy wires and things like that. Stuff you can make very easily out of PVC pipe and some antenna wire. So again, we'll post the link to those articles, but I'm going to scroll down through this article and we'll do some screenshots. But the first thing you want to do is get your parts. And so the article provides you a parts list, and you know, this is my piece of paper for me going shopping. And what I discovered is PVC pipe comes in 10 foot lengths. I needed 15 feet, join 3 sections together. So I ended up buying 30 feet of pipe. So I end up with parts for 2 antennas. You're going to need connector caps to join those PVC pipes together. So again, you can pick those up like this, and you're going to want end caps. Now, what I've discovered is most of the end caps have gone to this rounded version, which is a little more difficult to work with, but I was fortunate enough to find flat ones. One of the other parts you're going to need is this connector. And so this is the female version of this connector. So on the back side of it is where this antenna wire would go into, on the inside of the pole. And basically you run the wire, you can make a hole at the top of your PVC pipe that this is going to sit on, put the end cap on, run the wire through, and then run the wire that's going to your antenna tuner or radio down the side of the pipe. On the bottom end of it, they suggest in an article putting a kind of like a bolt through the end that you can actually then stick into the ground to make it easier to put up. And so you can get about inch bolts or half-inch bolts and run. Depends on what surface you plan on using it. May or may not need it. So one of the things that I found with their design instructions, you use brass connectors or brass screws and nuts, and this is the 3 here just keep this in place. You might want to add some waterproof sealant, even a hot glue gun, when you seat this, just to keep water from going in and getting into your end of your coax. If you get water into the end of your coax, you can pretty much ruin it, and it makes for bad connection, but you can also ruin the cable. So one of the things you want to do is before you actually seat this down, put a little bit of glue there. It's going to make it watertight. These 3 are just to keep it in place. What I also found was that the ones that I found had, I don't know if you can see it here, I'm sure Nikki can zoom in, but they had this extra ridge here. So you can see I had to kind of drill it to make it enough space I could get the bolt in so that it would stay vertical. The other problem I found is that it suggested taking one of these bolts, cut the head off of it, and then solder it here. So what you're going to end up with is a wire antenna coming out one side for 40 meters. They're different lengths, and we give those in the article. And then the opposite side, you tie the ground to that would go that way. So when you set this up, you'd have a wire going this side that way, center that way, which would be 40 meters. And then you have one going out this way, and again connected to there for the ground at 80 meters. So you end up with basically a star type configuration that one way and the other. Now you could just make it for one if you wanted to. Depends on what you want to do. I would suggest if you're going to do this, make it for the whole thing. And the reason is that 40 meters and 80 meters are the two bands that work best for NVIS communications. 40 meters is better during the day, 80 meters is better during the night. That gives you options then for what you're going to transmit. I know we've talked about the American Readout Radio Operators Network, AMRON, and they do regular nets every month on 40 and 80 meters, both voice and digital. And we're going to do a video on digital communications as well for you. But that's a good way to practice these. If you've got antenna restrictions in your neighborhood, you can set one of these up, and instead of using this kind of shiny type antenna wire, you can get some stuff that's black and pretty hard to see. So you can set it up, take it down, and they probably wouldn't even notice. So it's very easy to do. Very easy to then, if you break this down and take the 5-foot sections of pole apart, it's very easy to break it down in a bag. You know, basically you need your 3 5-foot sections of pole and parts, and you're good to go. So in the diagram, we'll post these, the end cap piece. So what I was saying about this centerpiece, so I tried soldering it, and what I found is it's very easy to break it off. So what I've done in the other one that I made, I actually drilled this centerpiece out carefully, just enough to give myself about 1/8 of an inch down into the connector without messing it up and going all the way through to the bottom. So I want to keep the inner core piece of this intact, if that makes sense. And then that way one of these bolts will actually sit in there, and it's much easier then to solder it, and it's going to stay in place. You put washers on here, so when I go to connect, you use the wire connectors that have the circular piece in, like you see, like you'd put on a battery terminal or something, to just the smaller ones. Put a couple of washers on there, so I'm going to put the 2 connectors on that side, 40 and 80, and then I'm going to do the same on one of these. Put the washer on the top and just screw it down. It just needs to be finger tight to make a good connection. That's going to sit on the top of my 15-foot pole. I'm going to have a wire coming out, coax coming out, that's going to go to, typically you want to use an auto tuner or an antenna tuner. This is one that I picked up. This is the MFJ, I'm trying to look at it upside down, MFJ 904. Pretty simple antenna tuner, cross wire, so you can just match the impedance to what you're using based on the frequency. The reason you want to match your antenna is it makes it more efficient. So, and that way you can use less power and get a better signal out. On the theory that the least amount of power you need to use, the least power you're going to drain from your battery, and why push 100 watts when you can do the same thing with 5 watts. Just makes good sense. So this little box I have here, it's a hard case. I've got a number of these, and I pick them up at Harbor Freight. They have them in about 3 or 4 different sizes. I've got some others here we'll show in some other videos. And I just put that equipment in to protect it. And you could also add, this one I don't think you need to put in an EMP-proof bag, but you'll see another one later that the radios are actually in a EMP-proof bag as well. Short piece of coax. So this, if you look on the back, you've got 2 connectors. One's antenna, one's transmitter. So the short cable goes from here to my transmitter. This cable from the antenna would go in there. And it does have an input for power, and that's really all that's for, is to light up the meter. You don't need it to actually operate this. You can buy automatic tuning ones, but more expensive, and I just wanted to go with something basic to play with this. And once you set it up a few times and you've done it a few times, you might mark the settings so that you know where to start with and you're pretty close to where you need to be. And the way that one of these meters works is that you've got two needles, and one's the power going out and one's the power coming back, and you want the reflected power to be as low as possible. That's how you end up with the ratio. So that's NVIS is one way. In this particular kit right now, this is a dipole antenna, a wire one for 80 meters. So it's similar to this, except I don't have both parts to it. I've just got the 80 meter part. So you'll see, and again, this was something I picked up at HRO, ham radio outlet, as to this part. And so one end is my ground. You can see one end's connected to this side of it. One end's connected to the center pin, right, on the other side. And so one side's your ground, one side's your power, your reflected, transmitted side. And I can run this out. And so this is 38 feet in either direction for your 80 meters. And then I have some isolators. So I would just take the wire, there is a little extra length on here. I just take the wire, wrap it around on itself a few times, and then take the cord, and there's two lengths here, cut to length, so that when I pull this out, you know, it's at the right angle, and I can just throw in a couple of stakes. And I think I have actually a couple of tent stakes, ground stakes underneath this box here somewhere. And so that one's an 80 meter ready to go. But again, you can use black antenna wire. You can find HRO carries that stuff as well. So that way it's not as conspicuous as nice, bright, shiny, you know, this wire. So, well, that's it. It's really actually very simple to do. The instructions that gentleman provides are pretty good, other than the little trick I found with this. You might shop around to make sure you can find the flat end caps. It makes it much easier than trying to work on a rounded one. I started to work on a rounded one and realized that that's going to be a lot of work, because that thing is just going to sit on top of it and kind of wobble. So I did manage to find some flat ones. So again, a few parts, easy to make. One is, you know, is the same old thing with preparedness, right? Two is one and one is none. So like I said, I've got two of these and I'm building another one. Have them in different places so I don't always have to carry one around with me. And so easy to use, easy to set up, wire dipole, very easy to set up. Not going to cost you a whole lot of money to do that. And then, you know, something to keep it in. I just happen to put this in a hard case. So with that, have fun. We'll post the links to the site, to the documents to help you build this. Have some fun. Practice on the Amron nets. They're regularly on there every month. 40 and 80 meters. See what you can pick up. And you don't actually have to have a ham license. You can actually set this up and listen without transmitting and see if you can hear that stuff. You know, and then obviously work on getting your general license if you don't have it. With that, if you like the video, hit like below. And if you have comments, post those. We'll try and answer them. And have a good day. Come over to Survival Dispatch Insider. We've got lots of articles on communications and medical stuff and lots of other stuff for you know, just a few bucks a month. With that, have a good day.